tell you something about Andrew. This is my boy right here. You disrespect him, you're disrespecting me.
Inside fighting, shout out to inside fighting.
We're back. It is the Fight Season Podcast. It's me, Jesse Rowe with Inside Fighting, joined as always by Timothy James, aka Timmy Shoes MMA on Twitter, Inside Fighting's head writer. What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well, Jesse. I'm glad to be back. Fight season. Let's go.
That's right. It's always fight season over here at Inside Fighting, and we're going from like one. Normally, when you have like these pay-per-views, or when you're in these long stretches of not having a UFC pay-per-view, you can be lost in the weeds a little bit. It's a little tough. You find clawing at stuff to talk about, throwing stuff at the wall. Not the case. It's actually been pretty good. A lot of good stuff to talk about, a lot of good fights going on. We're coming off of the weekend with Ilia Topuria absolutely putting on a masterclass against Josh Emmet, which is an awesome fight. I mean, I know Emmet, he got 50-42 on one of the scorecards. I still think it was a really good fight regardless of that. I think Emmet was always in the fight, even though he was losing. I feel like he still always had that puncher's chance, and we kind of talked about that last week. So just what were your thoughts on the fight overall?
Man, I thought it was a great coming out performance for Ilia Topuria. We already knew he was at that level, right? And I think most people expected him to win that fight. But it was just very entertaining because of what you said, right? Like Emmet was so tough, refused to be put away, and he always had that puncher's chance. It was like something out of a movie. In between the fourth and the fifth rounds, his corner's telling him, like, just go for broke, just go for it. And he comes out and he starts winging punches. Like, he never gave up on himself. So he got 50-42, but, you know, in a way, it was like a moral victory. I don't know. He probably wouldn't see it that way, but I don't think he needs to hang his head in shame or anything because, man, what a performance for both guys.
I think it's like the closest 50-42 a fight can be, because a lot of times in those fights, like Amanda Nunes, for example, like when she fought Irene Aldana, however you pronounce it, you never felt like Irene had a puncher's chance, right? It was like, you don't feel like that's going to happen. This felt like, it was obviously Topuria was dominating the fight, but there were so many moments where I was texting you and I'm like, dude, like, he's actually landing some shots here, and if he just is like he's 1 inch away from clipping the chin and this fight being over. I was riveted for a while in that fight. I knew Topuria was going to win so long as Emmet didn't get the knockout. That's exactly how it played out. Awesome performance by Topuria. Obviously, it opened up all the questions about Volkanovski. I don't want to harp on this too long, but Volk reacted to all the Topuria buzz and said that, I'm going to have to probably fight this guy eventually. There's a lot of buzz around this guy, but he considers Yair to be a bigger threat. Now, that could just be Volkanovski saying this because he has to promote a fight coming up. Obviously, next week he's going to be fighting Yair. Do you agree with that Yair is a more dangerous fight for Volkanovski at this point?
I can see why he thinks that, because Yair is a trickier puzzle to solve in the sense that he has a unique approach a little bit. He's a little bit more unorthodox. We know what Topuria is going to do, right? He's going to come in, he's going to use his boxing, he's going to pressure you forward. And Volkanovski has had a lot of success against those kind of guys. Now you take a guy like Yair, who's longer, rangier, unorthodox in his strikes. He has better kicks. So I think that's what Volk was probably thinking. I think that's maybe how he sees it, that Yair has some tricky things that he hasn't seen as much before. Topuria has a lot of tools that Volk has seen before and has beat before. So I think you're probably right that Volk's trying to sell the Yair fight, but I also can see why he might think that, just because Topuria, I don't want to say it's predictable. It feels like Volk has fought those kinds of guys, a guy with his approach before.
It's almost like Topuria and Yair are like a little bit two sides of the same coin, a little bit, where they are both the guy that could dethrone Volk. That a lot of people would see, oh, like that's the fight that could finally beat Volk, or this is the fight that could finally get Volk. but they're two such different fighters, where Topuria is much more like methodical, structured, well-balanced, well-rounded game, and Yair is just the wild card fighter, the guy that like can throw so many angles at you, throw so many different techniques, and he's rangy, but he can also get to the ground with you. Just, he has so many different things that he can do, and he's creative. We saw how he knocked out Korean Zombie. That being said, it almost made me start to think, like, do I want to see the Yair versus Topuria fight more than I want to see the VOLK versus Topuria fight? Now, I don't actually think I believe that. I just wonder if that fight has more potential for something crazy, like a crazy knockout happening, than like a Volkanovski fight, which generally don't have knockouts. He's a little bit like Strickland in a way, where he doesn't have like this incredible knockout power, but he just kind of spars with you for an entire fight, and he knows how to outpoint you. He knows how to just find all the right ranges and angles and everything to outpoint you. I almost feel like that fight would be more entertaining. So I'm almost rooting for a Yair, even though I still think Volk and versus Topuria is like one of the biggest featherweight fights ever. So I don't know. How do you feel about it?
No, I see what you mean. And then when you were talking about it, I was just thinking where Max Holloway is going to fit into all of this, because he has the fight coming up with the Korean Zombie. He's almost, I would be shocked, and I think most people would, if Max Holloway doesn't win that fight.
Yeah.
And he's in a really interesting position, because they're not going to put him up against Volk for the fourth time, probably. So maybe Holloway is going to have to fight Yair again, or, you know, I would actually like to see the Holloway versus Topuria fight just because of the matchup. That would be a crazy boxing match, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think Topuria probably hits a little bit harder, but Max is, you know, he's got an iron chin, so it'll be interesting to see how it shapes up on the in the featherweight division.
But yeah, to move on, the only thing that I want to touch on before we move to the fights this weekend is Conor McGregor going 0-5 on the Ultimate Fighter. It's tough times for Team McGregor, and once again, second straight week, really good fight between was it Carlos Vera? Is that his name? Carlos Vera versus Brad Katona, who won the Ultimate Fighter a few years back, trying to make his way back into the UFC. Good fight. Had a little bit of like a mini viral moment of McGregor had a couple hilarious things in this episode. McGregor telling the ref to stand the fight when Katona was on top of Vera, like punching him. McGregor goes, "Hey, I think we need to get some action here. Let's stand the fight, ref." While he's getting pounded on the ground, and then obviously complaining about how there wasn't a third round, which that's what I really want to get into before we get to the main gist of this. It's really stupid that there are only 2 rounds in the Ultimate Fighter. I don't get it. It's very dumb. How many fights have been won in a third round when a fighter's losing 2? I mean, like Dustin Poirier, he lost the first 2 rounds to who was it? The Australian guy, Hooker, and then ends up winning the next 3. I just think 3 is necessary to understand truly how good of a fighter. I don't know. Do you agree with me?
No, I get what you're saying 100%. It's an exhibition fight. These fights actually don't even go on their professional records.
Right.
So I guess that's why they do it. They don't want to have to.
It doesn't go against your professional record, but it counts against your ability to go into the UFC. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. How can you know if you're good if you can't win in a 3-round fight?
Maybe there's some sort of behind the scenes details about why they do that I'm not aware of. But you're right. I mean, I would like to see those fights go 3 rounds too, because exactly what you said. Could you imagine the Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler fight? If that fight was only 1 round, everyone would be like, "Oh, Chandler won 10-8." Or if if there had been 1 close round and then Chandler had his good round and then the fight ended there, and Oliveira never gets his chance to come back and knock him out, which he did in the very next round.
Especially when both rounds were close too. In the Ultimate Fighter, the last episode, both rounds were very close. And it's like, oh, we decided, yeah, you win the fight. Like, it wasn't a dominant victory by any means. I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. I understood why Conor was upset about that more so than like telling the ref to stay on the fight, which was just hilarious to me. It was really funny.
Yeah, it reminded me of his fight with Chad Mendes. At one point, Chad Mendes is on top of him, raining down elbows. Conor's talking shit to Chad Mendes. Like, he's saying something like, is that all you got? And then he sort of looks back at Herb Dean like this, and he's like, aren't you going to stand us up? And then he gets smacked with an elbow. It's like,
Right.
if you want to stand up, bro, you got to find a way out of that. So,
yeah, well, be that as it may, the main thing coming out of this is today, video was leaked from the next episode. We've all seen this footage of McGregor pushing Chandler, this altercation in the middle of the ring at the Apex. And they've sort of like hyped this matchup. They've promoted The Ultimate Fighter based on this one scene. And we're finally going to get it next week. Well, lo and behold, it gets leaked online. And we managed to see it. And it looks to me like McGregor goes 0-6. That's the gist I'm getting here, is that Chandler goes 6-0. But McGregor, he was in good form here. I know that people say that his trash talk is dying. I think he was in good form because McGregor said, last week he said, to Chandler after going 0-5, let's make this 3 rounds. You ever been in any 5-round fights, Michael? You ever won any championship belts? You ever won any title fights? So that was good. That was one. And then this week he starts saying to Chandler how a lot of your fighters, these young guys, were in the UFC before you ever were, you Bellator tick. I mean,
yep,
that is
good.
Conor McGregor at its best. I know that he doesn't have that snap in his words like he used to, but I thought that was well prepared and well said by McGregor. And then, of course, he pushes him, gets upset, and then Chandler says, "We're gonna keep piling these wins up. We're going to keep piling them up. You should be there for your team." That suggests to me that McGregor goes 0-6. Do you have the same take here?
Yeah, for sure. I think Michael Chandler probably has a good point because Conor has not been a very present coach. I mean, they show clips of him like sparring the guys and being a good coach when he's actually there, but he hasn't been there for the weigh-ins. I don't think he was there for the Carlos Vera weigh-in. He hasn't been there for
weigh-ins, yeah.
So, I mean, he shows up for the fights. It seems like he shows up for one training session maybe because these guys are training a lot. And they're usually one clips like of him in the same shorts or whatever, sparring with the guys. So, I think Chandler probably has a point too. I know Conor McGregor's the biggest star. He's got a million things going on. He's got his clothing line. He's got his whiskey. He's an idol of the sport, right? But you got to show up for your fighters. I don't know how much of a difference that would make. You know what I was thinking? I was wondering if McGregor regrets picking the prospects over the veterans.
I'm sure he does, yeah. Especially because Brad Katona is one of his guys. I mean, that's like his boy. He fights for his gym in Ireland, I think, is what it is. Or,
yep.
Yeah.
SBG Ireland, yep.
So
he trains.
And he's the one guy that Team Chandler fighters have been saying doesn't really feel like he's part of their team. So I'm sure there was some, but Conor didn't seem to back him all that much. Conor was pissed that Katona won. So, yeah, a lot of people are saying that Conor's using this to promote his whiskey company, to promote, McGregor Fast and things like that. I don't know. That was the first time where I saw a moment where I'm like, you know what? I would be kind of excited if this fight actually does happen. I haven't been all that much excited about the Chandler McGregor thing, but this was the first time where I thought, okay, I could get behind this. I hope it actually happens. Last word, do you think it actually happens?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens. I don't know if we're ever going to see Conor fight again. And if we do, I don't think it's going to be against Michael Chandler. I think it's going to be maybe Nate Diaz comes back for the trilogy in UFC, something like that. Or some guy with some bigger name recognition. I actually saw a comment. Someone said Michael Chandler is going to have to end up fighting Armin Saryukian or something like that. And poor Michael Chandler,
Man, what a drop off in the financial department. Yeah. That is, yeah.
And also probably a tougher fight at this point too, because
we don't a tougher fight.
We don't know how Conor's going to be after his leg break. So yeah, I don't think it happens. I think if Conor comes back to fight, it's gonna be like maybe a trilogy with Nate Diaz or some other big name, like I don't know, maybe Jorge Masvidal comes out of retirement to fight him, something like that. I don't think it's gonna be against a guy like Chandler. I honestly think he'll box again before he fights MMA again.
I mean, I definitely think Conor will box 100%.
Let me tell you something about Andrew. This is my boy right here. You disrespect him, you're disrespecting me.
Inside fighting, Shanti inside fighting.